Captain Juno Wraith stood at the helm of the Aegis, staring at the holographic map that flickered before her. The map showed the galaxy's heart, once the source of untold energy and stability, now a fragmented, dying entity. The signal from the galaxy's coalition was crystal clear. If the core wasn't repaired soon, the very structure of spacetime itself would begin to collapse and entire star systems would vanish. The sound of footsteps broke her concentration, and she turned to see her first officer, Lieutenant Eli Zhang, entering the bridge. His face was pale, eyes wide with concern. "You need to see this," he said, his voice grim. Juno followed him to the communications console, where a live transmission from the Galactic Council was playing. The alien faces of the council members, their features as diverse as the stars, were all filled with urgent fear. At the center was a towering figure, General Zekor of the Andirax Dominion, an ancient species known for their strength and wisdom. His heavy-set frame trembled as he spoke. "The core is dying, and with it, the entire galaxy," Zekor's voice rumbled. "The fracture is spreading. Soon, all of our worlds will collapse into the void. We've tried everything. We cannot fix it alone." Juno's eyes narrowed. The core's power had once been the backbone of the galaxy's stability. Every civilization had relied on it, from the ancient architects who built the galactic network to the younger species like humans, whose rapid expansion had only just begun to tap into its power. But now, the pulse of the galaxy was faltering, and if the core truly fractured beyond repair, it would mean the end of everything. "We're calling on Earth," Zekor continued. "Your people are known for their resilience, their ingenuity. We need you to help us." Juno's mind raced. Earth had been drawn into galactic affairs only recently, its influence growing after a series of victories in interstellar diplomacy and technology development. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's potential until now, but repairing the core, it was beyond any technology Earth had. Juno turned to Eli, who was staring at the transmission with a mixture of disbelief and dread. "They're asking us to do the impossible." "There's no one else left to turn to," Eli said quietly. A sharp tone cut through the tension, signaling an incoming message. The voice that followed was unexpected. Commander Lyra Kess, the head of Earth's Space Exploration Division, and a close ally of Juno. Her face appeared on the screen, concern etched into her features. "Captain, we've analyzed the distress signal. The core's instability is unlike anything we've encountered. It's not just energy shifting, it's a wave of destructive forces moving through every system in the galaxy. Entire star systems are already vanishing, disappearing from the maps. If we don't act fast, we'll be next." Juno clenched her jaw. The situation was dire. She'd led missions before, but this was different. There were no second chances. The fate of billions of lives rested on their shoulders, and yet, as overwhelming as the task seemed, Juno could feel the weight of responsibility settle in. Earth had always found a way to rise above its challenges. Now, they would have to do the same for the galaxy. "We're ready to leave, Captain," Eli said, his voice low but determined. "But there's more to this than what we're being told. I can feel it. Something about the core's destruction isn't natural." Juno didn't respond immediately, her mind on the gravity of the task ahead. "We're going in," she said finally. "Prepare the crew for departure." The Aegis engines roared to life as the crew began to mobilize, making final preparations for their voyage. Juno stood alone for a moment, staring at the map of the galaxy. The journey would be long, fraught with dangers they couldn't predict, and the stakes higher than any mission before. But Earth had never backed down from a challenge, and this time, the galaxy's future would depend on its most unlikely champions, humanity. With a determined breath, Juno turned, walking toward the airlock. They were about to embark on a journey that would forever change the course of history. The journey to the galaxy's core was a harrowing one. As the Aegis sped through the vast emptiness of space, the crew had little time to rest. Every hour seemed to bring new reports of cosmic anomalies, collapsing stars, gravitational disturbances, and entire worlds falling into the void. The mission was becoming more urgent with each passing moment, but nothing prepared them for the chaos they encountered upon reaching the outer edge of the core's shattered shell. Juno stood at the command center, her hands resting on the console as she watched the swirling voids of dark energy ahead. The core's instability had caused ruptures in spacetime, creating gravitational anomalies that bent light and twisted the fabric of the universe. The Aegis lurched slightly as they entered the danger zone, the ship's artificial gravity systems compensating for the fluctuations in space. "This place is a war zone," Eli muttered, his eyes fixed on the readouts. "Not just a war zone," Juno replied, her voice tight with concern. "A galactic one. The core is destabilizing, and every faction is trying to stake their claim." As they ventured deeper, the once quiet stretches of space were now teeming with activity. Small fleets of ships, alien and human alike, fought bitter skirmishes, attempting to gain control of the regions near the core. From the Aegis vantage point, they could see the wreckage of ships drifting in the void, their remains caught in the gravitational pull of the fractured core. But that wasn't the most unsettling sight. It was the presence of the Voidwalkers. "These are just pirates," Eli said, squinting at a flickering image on the screen. "They're organized, militarized." A fleet of sleek, obsidian-colored ships appeared on the radar, moving in perfect formation. Their weapons glowed a dark, unnatural hue. The Voidwalkers, a shadowy faction of intergalactic raiders, were infamous for their ruthlessness. Juno had heard the whispers. There were rumors that the Voidwalkers were more than just bandits, that they had knowledge of the core's true nature, and that they were willing to destroy anything that stood in their way. "Captain, they're heading straight for us," Lieutenant Aria Jansen, the ship's tactical officer, reported, her voice laced with tension. "Shields are holding at 92%, but they won't hold much longer if we're caught in their crossfire." Juno glanced at the screen, her mind racing. The Voidwalkers were notorious for their ferocity and unpredictability. They wouldn't hesitate to take the Aegis down, especially if they knew it was carrying humans into the heart of the crisis. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Juno ordered, her voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. "Lock all weapons, but don't fire unless they engage first. We need to keep them talking." As the Voidwalkers' fleet grew closer, the Aegis crew braced themselves for the inevitable confrontation. Juno hoped that their diplomatic ties would be enough to prevent a full-scale attack. The mission was already dangerous enough without having to face the Voidwalkers' bloodthirsty assault. The first warning shot came as a brilliant beam of energy streaked through the void, narrowly missing the Aegis. It was a challenge, a test of resolve. The Aegis dodged it with a sharp turn, sending the ship spinning into a series of unpredictable maneuvers that left the Voidwalkers' fire dangerously behind them. "Commander Juno Ray," came the chilling voice over the comms, its synthetic tone sending a shiver down her spine. "We've been watching you. You are not the saviors you think you are." The voice was unmistakable, a Voidwalker commander, and one with a personal vendetta. Juno's blood ran cold as she recognized the voice. It was Taliax, the leader of the Voidwalkers, a ruthless tactician who had built her empire on the shattered remains of civilizations. "We don't seek to repair the core, Commander," Taliax continued, her voice dripping with venom. "We seek to control it, and you, human, are in our way." Before Juno could respond, the Voidwalkers' fleet closed in, their weapons charging for another strike. It was clear that diplomacy had failed. The Aegis was now a target, and the crew had no choice but to fight back. "Raise shields to full power," Juno commanded, her hands gripping the armrests of the captain's chair. "Prepare all cannons, target their lead ship." The battle erupted in an instant. A barrage of energy blasts lit up the darkness, the Aegis cannons firing in rapid succession as they dodged and counterattacked. The Voidwalkers fought viciously, but the crew of the Aegis was quick and resourceful. Earth's ingenuity, as always, gave them an edge. Ailey's voice broke through the chaos. "Captain, there's a massive ship approaching. It's not like anything I've ever seen." Juno's heart skipped a beat as she turned to the sensor display. A colossal void ship, several times the size of the Aegis, emerged from the dark nebula ahead, its hull covered in dark, shifting symbols that glowed faintly in the shadows. "That's no Voidwalker ship," she muttered, her pulse quickening. "Something else is here." Before she could issue another command, the unknown ship fired. A massive shockwave erupted through space, rattling the Aegis and throwing it off course. The crew braced for impact, knowing that the battle was far from over. The shockwave hit the Aegis like a hammer blow. The ship groaned and shuddered under the intense force, alarms blaring across the bridge as the crew struggled to maintain control. Juno's hands gripped the armrests of her chair, her eyes locked on the viewport, watching as the colossal unknown ship loomed larger. "Report," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the screech of metal and the cacophony of warnings flooding the bridge. "Shields are down to 70%, Captain." Aria's voice came through, frantic but focused. "We've lost power to the port engines. We can't outrun them at this rate." Juno's mind raced, calculating their next move. The unknown ship had emerged from the nebula with precision, as though it had been waiting for the right moment. Its appearance, coupled with the devastating shockwave, suggested it wasn't aligned with the Voidwalkers or any faction they had encountered. This was something else entirely, something much more powerful. "Any identification?" Juno asked, her gaze still fixed on the ship. "Nothing, Captain," Eli replied from his station. "The ship's technology is unlike anything in our databases. It's older, almost ancient, but it's not on any record. It's as if it just appeared out of nowhere." The words echoed in Juno's mind, "appeared out of nowhere." That couldn't be a coincidence. She had been tracking the Voidwalkers for months and knew their tactics. This was different, too organized, too precise. It was as though someone, or something, was deliberately intervening, manipulating the situation to keep them off balance. "Captain," Eli continued, his voice tightening, "I'm picking up strange energy readings coming from that ship. It's connected to the core." Juno's heart skipped a beat. If the unknown ship was linked to the core, then they weren't just dealing with a rogue faction or opportunistic pirates. Whoever, or whatever, controlled this ship had a stake in the galaxy's heart, and that could mean disaster for everyone. "Area, full evasive maneuvers," Juno barked, her mind racing. "We need to get close enough to see what they're doing. If they're trying to harness the core's energy, we need to stop them before it's too late." "We can't risk another hit, Captain," Aria replied, her hands flying across the console. "If that ship gets a clear shot at us, we're done for." Juno didn't have time to argue. "Then we'll have to take the fight to them." The crew's determination was unwavering as they set their course for the heart of the shattered core. The Aegis lurched forward, pushing through the unstable gravitational forces that were distorting space around them. The unknown ship followed them, staying just out of reach but maintaining a constant, calculated distance. With each passing moment, the danger grew. The core itself seemed to pulse and writhe in response to the ship's presence, sending violent ripples of energy across the surrounding space. Juno felt a cold dread creeping up her spine. The core was alive, its instability more than just a simple failure. It was reacting to something, to someone. "What are they doing?" Juno whispered, her voice hoarse with disbelief. Suddenly, a new signal interrupted their comms. A strange voice filled the bridge, resonating with an eerie calm that sent chills down the crew's spines. "This is your final warning, human," the voice said, echoing across the ship's speakers. "Turn back now, or you will witness the birth of the true power of the core." We are the keepers of the heart, and we will not allow you to stand in our way." Juno's blood ran cold. The keepers of the heart, another faction she had never encountered. But the name echoed with an unsettling familiarity, like a distant memory that refused to be recalled. "Who are you?" Juno demanded, her voice sharp with authority. "What is your connection to the core?" The voice paused for a long moment, as if considering the question. Then it answered, its tone colder than before. "The core is the last remnant of the old gods, the architects of this galaxy. We are their chosen. You, human, are nothing more than a fleeting spark. You cannot comprehend the power you are trying to tame." Juno's mind raced. Old gods? The core's origins were more mysterious than she'd imagined. She'd always suspected there was more to the core's creation, but she never dreamed it had such a profound connection to ancient, almost mythical forces. And now, they were being confronted by a faction claiming to be its custodians. "We're not leaving," Juno declared firmly, her gaze steady. "You don't own the galaxy, and we won't let you use the core to destroy it." The voice chuckled darkly. "Then you are already too late. The process has begun. The core's heart is awakening, and with it, the galaxy will know true destruction." The comms went silent. Before Juno could react, the massive unknown ship surged forward, its weapons locking onto the Aegis with terrifying precision. A blast of energy shot from the ship, the intensity of the strike pushing the Aegis back into a spiraling dive. The crew was thrown against their seats as alarms blared, the hull groaning under the strain of the impact. "Damage report," Juno yelled, holding onto the armrest as the ship lurched again. "We've lost aft shields." Area called out, "Hull integrity at 50%. The core's energy readings are spiking. Whatever they're doing, it's making things worse." Juno's fists clenched. The keepers of the heart were not just a threat to them. They were playing with forces beyond anyone's understanding, and they had just begun to unleash them. "We need to act now," she said, her voice cold with resolve. "Get us close enough to that ship. We're going to find out exactly what they're trying to do and stop them, no matter the cost." As the Aegis steadied itself, Juno braced for what was to come. The real battle was just beginning. The Aegis shuddered violently as another blast from the unknown ship rocked them. Sparks flew from the console as the ship's outer hull began to buckle under the strain. Juno could feel the crew's anxiety rising, but her mind was razor-focused. They couldn't afford to be caught in the crossfire any longer. They needed to get close to the mysterious ship to learn what the Keepers of the Heart were planning, and stop them before they could unleash the true power of the core. "Area, bring us around," Juno ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Get us in firing range. We need to disable their engines." Aria's hands flew across the controls, her face pale but determined. "Aye, Captain, but we're not the only ones with firepower. They've got us locked." Juno clenched her fists. "We'll make it work, full throttle." "Eli, plot a course to the aft of their ship. We need to find a weak spot." Eli didn't hesitate. "On it, Captain. We've got one shot at this." The Aegis surged forward, maneuvering with impressive agility despite the damage they'd sustained. Juno watched as the massive unknown ship loomed ever larger, its weapons charging for another devastating strike. It was no longer a mere skirmish. This was a battle for the survival of everything they had fought for, everything humanity had yet to protect. Juno's heart raced as she looked at the screen. The Keepers of the Heart had activated a massive energy shield, a barrier of shimmering light that surrounded the colossal vessel like an impenetrable wall. It was unlike any shield technology Juno had ever seen. This was something far more advanced, something ancient. "Shield at full power," Eli called out, his fingers moving rapidly over the console. "I can't find a weak spot." Juno's gaze narrowed. She knew their only hope was to get close enough to disable the ship's systems manually. If they didn't, They'd be caught in a loop of fire that would end with their ship reduced to space debris. "We'll have to board them," Juno said, her tone resolute. "Prepare the boarding pods. Area, take us in as close as you can. We're going to hit them where it hurts." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but none of them hesitated. Earth's military had trained them for extreme situations. They were prepared to do whatever it took to stop the Keepers of the Heart from destroying everything they'd sworn to protect. As Aria piloted the Aegis in a daring approach, Juno's mind raced. The Keepers were clearly not ordinary raiders. They had knowledge of the core's deeper mysteries, possibly even access to its power. If they could harness the core's energy fully, nothing would stop them from reshaping the galaxy in their image. Juno couldn't allow that. Earth's people couldn't allow that. The ship closed the distance, and Juno ordered the crew to prep for the boarding operation. Eli, Aria, and Lieutenant Jansen would accompany her. It was a high-risk maneuver, but they had no other choice. "Pods are ready, Captain," Aria reported, her voice steady despite the intense tension in the air. "We're in position." Juno nodded, her jaw set in determination. "Then let's move. We go in, disable their systems, and take control of their ship before they can strike again." The team suited up in their armored exosuits, the heavy weight of their gear adding to the urgency of the moment. Juno glanced at each of her officers, their faces grim but unwavering. This was no longer just about saving Earth. This was about saving the galaxy from the Keepers of the Heart and whatever dark forces they were channeling through the core. With a final nod, Juno led the team into the boarding pods. The doors slammed shut, and with a deafening roar, the pods shot from the Aegis, hurtling toward the unknown ship. As they neared the hull of the colossal vessel, Juno's heart pounded in her chest. They were about to breach a ship unlike any they had encountered before. Whatever lay beyond the walls of that vessel, it would test them in ways they couldn't predict. The pods clamped onto the hull of the ship with a violent jolt. The air inside was thick with the sound of their breathing, each exhale laden with tension. "On my mark," Juno whispered to her team, her voice low but firm. "Prepare to breach." The pod's outer doors slid open, revealing the strange, dark architecture of the alien vessel. Jagged lines of energy pulsed across the walls, and symbols, ancient, glowing, lined the corridors, making the ship feel like it was alive. As Juno stepped onto the cold metallic floor, she felt a wave of unease wash over her. "This ship isn't just a weapon," Eli muttered, eyes wide. "It's a temple." Juno didn't reply. The Keepers of the Heart had no time for reverence. They were about to learn that humanity would not bow to their ancient power. The team advanced cautiously, weapons drawn, the eerie glow of the ship's corridors casting long shadows. With every step, Juno's instincts screamed that they were walking into the heart of something much darker than they had imagined. The Keepers had a plan, and unless they acted quickly, the galaxy would be doomed to feel the full force of its fury. The eerie glow of the Keepers' ship's corridors bathed Juno and her team in an unnatural light, casting long, distorted shadows across the cold metal floors. Every step they took seemed to echo through the vast emptiness, amplifying the oppressive silence that hung in the air. Eli, his hand gripping his blaster, scanned the surroundings, his face tense. "This place is ancient," Eli muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like the ship itself is watching us." Juno nodded, her instincts on high alert. The ship was unlike anything they'd encountered before. Its design was intricate, yet functional, with sleek, organic curves that didn't resemble any human-made architecture. The strange symbols etched into the walls pulsed softly, as though alive, reacting to their presence. It felt as if they were trespassing on something far older than any civilization they had known, a civilization that had once shaped the galaxy itself. They moved down the narrow corridor, each of them attuned to the faint hum of the ship's energy, a steady rhythm that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. The deeper they went, the more intense the feeling became. It wasn't just the physical unease of being in hostile territory. It was the strange, oppressive sense that they were on the brink of uncovering a secret that could shatter everything they thought they knew about the galaxy and its history. Ahead, the hallway opened into a large chamber. At the far end stood a massive door, its surface covered in intricate carvings, glowing faintly in the dark. Juno motioned for the team to stop, her eyes narrowing. This was it, the heart of the Keeper's ship, the place where their ancient power originated. "Stay sharp," she ordered quietly, her voice low and commanding. "We don't know what we'll find behind that door." As they approached, the symbols on the door seemed to react to their presence, the carvings shifting and rearranging themselves in a mesmerizing pattern. The door's surface began to pulse, a deep, resonant hum filling the air, as if the ship was awakening at their approach. Juno glanced at her team, their faces set with determination. They were ready. This was their only chance to stop the Keepers before they could harness the core's power and reshape the galaxy in their own image. With a sharp motion, Juno stepped forward and placed her hand on the door. A surge of energy passed through her as the door opened before her, revealing an immense chamber bathed in an otherworldly light. At the center of the room stood a massive, crystalline structure, its surface shifting with the same strange symbols that adorned the walls. The crystal seemed to pulse with an inner light, radiating an almost hypnotic energy that seemed to reverberate in Juno's chest. "What is this?" Eli breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the sight. "This is what they've been after," Juno said quietly, her voice filled with awe and dread. "The core, it's not just energy, it's something more." Before anyone could respond, a figure stepped out from the shadows, cloaked in flowing robes of dark, shimmering fabric. The figure was tall, humanoid, but its features were obscured by a hood, only a faint glow emanating from beneath. Juno's breath caught in her throat as she instinctively raised her weapon, but the figure raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "You've come far, human," the figure's voice echoed through the chamber, soft yet commanding. It was a woman's voice, but there was an unsettling quality to it, like the very words themselves were imbued with power. "But you are too late." Juno's grip tightened on her blaster, her eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, her voice filling the room like a dark melody. "I am Seraphis, one of the Keepers of the Heart. We are the protectors of the galaxy's true power, the last remnants of the ancients who shaped the universe before it was torn apart." Juno felt a shiver run down her spine. The Keepers of the Heart were more than just a faction. They were the guardians of something far older, far more dangerous than she had imagined. They had known the secrets of the core, perhaps even controlled it for millennia. Seraphis raised her hand again, and the crystal at the center of the room pulsed more brightly, its light now filling every corner of the chamber. "The core is not just a source of energy," she continued. "It is the heart of all things. It is the lifeblood of the galaxy, the very essence of existence itself, and we are its chosen. The power of the core flows through us, and through it, we will return the galaxy to its rightful state." Juno's mind reeled as the implications of Seraphis' words sank in. "You want to remake the galaxy? Destroy everything and start over?" Seraphis smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent a chill through the room. "Not destroy, purge." She stepped closer, her gaze locking with Juno's. "The galaxy is broken, corrupted by your kind. The old gods foresaw this. They gave us the core to heal the wounds of the universe, and now we will do what must be done." Juno's heart raced. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The Keepers didn't just seek to control the core, they intended to use it to reshape the entire galaxy, to wipe the slate clean and start again. And if they succeeded, Earth, humanity, and everything they had fought for would be wiped out in an instant. "We won't let you do that," Juno said, her voice resolute. "We will stop you." Seraph's eyes glowed with a terrible, ancient light as she stepped closer. You have no choice, human. The core is already awakening, and you are standing in its way. With a single gesture, the room filled with a blinding flash of energy. The core was reacting, awakening, and now the battle for the galaxy's future would begin in earnest. The blinding flash of energy filled the chamber, forcing Juno and her team to shield their eyes. The air itself seemed to ripple with the power of the core, vibrating in a low, resonant hum that rattled their bones. Juno's heart raced, her mind scrambling to process the situation. The Keepers of the Heart weren't just protecting the core, they were using it, channeling its unimaginable energy to reshape the galaxy as they saw fit. Get down! Juno shouted as the wave of energy surged outward, slamming them all to the floor. The ground beneath them trembled, as if the very foundations of the ship were buckling under the force of the core's awakening. The crystalline structure at the center of the room pulsed brighter, its light now searing through the darkness like a second sun. Juno gritted her teeth, pushing herself to her feet as the others scrambled to do the same. The air felt thick, charged with an oppressive, almost tangible force. The symbols that lined the walls of the chamber were now glowing brightly, shifting and changing in time with the pulse of the core. Seraphis, standing at the center of it all, seemed unfazed by the chaos unfolding around her. Her eyes glowed with an eerie light, and a cold smile curled at the corners of her lips. The galaxy is dying, human, she said, her voice calm and authoritative, despite the growing storm of energy. It has been broken for millennia, fractured by your kind's greed, war, and corruption. We, the Keepers, are the ones who will restore balance. Juno's fists clenched. By purging billions of lives, she shot back, her voice filled with fury. By destroying everything that humanity has worked for. The core is not a weapon, Seraphis countered, her voice like silk. It is the means of healing. The galaxy will be remade, purged of its imperfections. You will understand soon enough, and then you will bow before it. Juno's mind raced. She couldn't let this happen. The core's power was too great, too dangerous to be wielded by anyone, let alone a faction with such a distorted view of what the galaxy should be. If the Keepers succeeded, the galaxy would fall into chaos, an artificial rebirth that would obliterate everything in its path. No, Juno said, her voice hard as stone. We won't let you take the core's power and remake the galaxy in your image. With a swift motion, Juno motioned for her team to fall into position. They had to act fast, before the core's energy overwhelmed them all. The chamber was alive with pulsing energy, each heartbeat of the crystal amplifying the storm that raged around them. If they didn't stop Seraphis now, they'd lose everything. Eli, she called, disable the crystal's power relay. Find a way to shut it down. Eli nodded quickly, his face pale but determined. On it, Captain. Aria and Lieutenant Jansen flanked Juno, weapons drawn, ready to cover her as she moved in. They couldn't risk leaving Eli alone in such a volatile situation. As much as they needed to stop Seraphis, they also needed to ensure the core didn't tear itself, and everything else, apart. Juno took a deep breath and charged forward, her boots pounding against the floor as she sprinted toward the glowing crystal. The storm of energy intensified with every step, pushing against her like an invisible wall. But she pressed on, feeling the burn of the strain as the force of the core's awakening buffeted her from all sides. Behind her, she heard Aria shout, "Incoming!" Juno barely had time to react before a violent burst of energy erupted from the crystal, surging toward her like a tidal wave. She leaped to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the blast that scorched the floor where she'd been standing. The room trembled, cracks spreading across the walls as the force of the core's power threatened to rip the ship apart. "Captain, get down!" Ailey's voice shouted, urgent and strained. Juno didn't hesitate. She dove behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding another wave of destructive energy. She could feel the ship groaning, its structural integrity weakening as the core's power escalated. "We have to act now," Juno shouted to the team. "Eli, what's your status?" Eli's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm almost there, Captain. The power relay's core is shielded. If I can't break through, this whole ship will be bathed in that energy." Juno's mind raced. They didn't have much time before the ship became an unstable reactor, and Seraphis was fully aware of that. The Keepers had activated the core to its full potential, and unless they could stop it, everything was about to implode. She looked back at Seraphis, who had not moved. Her eyes were still glowing with that unnatural light, as if she were in communion with the core itself. "This is your final warning, human," Seraphis said, her voice cold, as though she were speaking to a child who had no concept of the universe's grand design. "You cannot stop what has already begun." "We'll see about that," Juno replied, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of everything on the line. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. The core was a ticking time bomb, and they were running out of time. The ship groaned violently around them as the core's power surged once more. The walls trembled, and the floor beneath Juno's feet seemed to vibrate with an unbearable force. Each pulse of energy from the crystal sent shockwaves through the chamber, reverberating throughout the Keeper's ship. Juno felt her heart race as the very fabric of the vessel threatened to collapse under the strain. "We can't keep dodging these waves forever," Aria shouted over the noise, crouching behind a shattered pillar as another blast of energy sent shards of metal flying. The ship groaned violently around them as the core's power surged once more. The walls trembled, and the floor beneath Juno's feet seemed to vibrate with an unbearable force. Each pulse of energy from the crystal sent shockwaves through the chamber, reverberating throughout the Keeper's ship. Juno felt her heart race as the very fabric of the vessel threatened to collapse under the strain. "We can't keep dodging these waves forever," Aria shouted over the noise, crouching behind a shattered pillar as another blast of energy sent shards of metal flying. "We don't have forever," Juno replied, her voice firm, though a flicker of doubt gnawed at her insides. They were running out of time. The core was awakening faster than she'd anticipated. If Eli couldn't disable the relay soon, the ship, and possibly the entire galaxy, would be lost. "Eli, how much longer?" Juno asked, her voice cutting through the chaos. There was a moment of tense silence before Eli's voice crackled through her comms. "I'm in position, but the relay's more complex than I thought. I need another minute." Juno's eyes flicked to the glowing crystal at the center of the room, its pulses growing more erratic with every passing second. The ship's interior was starting to glow with a sickly, pulsing light, like the heartbeat of a dying star. "You don't have a minute," Juno snapped, her heart pounding. They had to act now. The ship was breaking apart, and if they didn't stop the core from fully awakening, they would all be caught in a cataclysmic event that would rip through everything in its wake. The Keeper's leader, Seraphis, stood motionless, her eyes still glowing with that unnatural light, as if she were communing with the very heart of the galaxy. Her voice, though soft, held an air of finality. "You cannot fight destiny, human. The core has chosen its path. You are but ants beneath its power." Juno felt a flare of anger rise within her, but she quickly suppressed it. Now was not the time for a battle of words. It was time for action. She turned to Aria and Jansen. "Cover me. I'm going for the core." "Captain, don't," Aria began, but Juno was already moving. She dashed across the room, dodging another burst of energy that exploded nearby. The air crackled with the force of the attack, but Juno didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. The core was their only chance to stop the Keepers from remaking the galaxy. If she could reach it, maybe, just maybe, she could disrupt the energy long enough for Eli to complete his task. The core pulsed with a deafening hum, sending tremors through the room with each beat. Juno reached it, the force of the energy almost overwhelming as she pressed herself against the crystalline surface. The light was blinding, and the heat radiating off the core made the air shimmer around her. "Eli, do it now," Juno shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. The core was alive, breathing, and if she didn't stop it. A flash of light erupted from the crystal, blinding her for a split second. When the light faded, Juno was thrown back violently, as if an invisible hand had struck her. She hit the ground hard, her breath knocked out of her. Her vision swam for a moment before she forced herself to her feet. "Juno." Aria's voice rang out as she rushed to her side, helping her up. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Juno gasped, brushing the dust off her suit. Her pulse was racing, but she had no time to dwell on the impact. They were running out of time. From across the room, Eli's voice crackled through her comms once more. "Captain, I did it. The relay's down." The moment Eli's words reached her ears, the core let out a deafening roar, its light flaring wildly before it suddenly began to flicker. The pulse of energy that had been radiating from it grew erratic, each flash threatening to tear the ship apart. The ship's groans turned into sharp, screeching noises as the energy system overloaded. Seraphiz's face twisted into an expression of shock, her eyes widening with disbelief. "No, you've disrupted the core's flow." "You were warned," Juno said, her voice steady, though adrenaline coursed through her veins. "You were never meant to control it." With a final, agonizing shriek, the core's energy began to collapse inward, its blinding light flickering as it reverted back into an unstable state. The entire ship trembled, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The Keeper's ship was disintegrating around them. "Everyone, get to the pods," Juno shouted. Now. There was no time to waste. The ship was collapsing, and they had no choice but to escape before it imploded. Juno turned, running toward the nearest escape pod, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, she heard the Keepers shouting in fury, but she couldn't look back. As she reached the pod, the others were already inside, ready to launch. Juno sealed the door behind her and slammed her hand on the release control. The pod shot away from the disintegrating ship with a violent jolt, escaping the heart of the storm. Behind them, the Keeper's ship exploded in a cataclysmic burst of energy, sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. The force of the explosion sent their escape pod tumbling, but Aria expertly righted the vessel, stabilizing it as they hurtled away from the wreckage. Juno exhaled, her heart still pounding as they watched the massive ship break apart in the distance. They had stopped the Keepers, for now, but Juno knew this wasn't the end. The core might have been contained, but the battle for the galaxy's future was far from over, and they would face even darker forces ahead. "Set course for Earth," Juno said, her voice low but resolute. "We're not done yet." The escape pod drifted through the remnants of the Keeper's ship, the last echoes of its destruction fading into the cold emptiness of space. Outside the window, the massive debris field shimmered with the aftermath of the explosion, a burst of energy so powerful that it left a gaping wound in the fabric of the galaxy itself. The Keeper's ambitions had been shattered, but their legacy would linger, a dark shadow over everything humanity had worked to preserve. Juno leaned back in her seat, her eyes fixed on the distant wreckage. It was over, but the price of victory weighed heavily on her heart. So much had been lost. Countless lives had been sacrificed in the battle for control of the core, and the damage done to the galaxy was far from undone. The core's power was not something that could simply be restored. Its very nature was an enigma, a force of creation and destruction that demanded respect. "How many made it out?" Juno asked, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. Aria, sitting beside her at the control panel, glanced at the readout. "All of us," she said, her tone a mix of relief and solemnity. "But we're not the only ones who survived. There are other pods scattered throughout the system, and we've picked up distress signals from a few of the Keepers." Juno nodded, the weight of their mission settling around her like a heavy cloak. "We need to make sure they don't regroup." This war isn't over. A cold silence hung in the cabin. The keepers were no more, but their ideology, their vision for the galaxy, was far from eradicated. Juno had seen the fanaticism in Seraphis' eyes, the unwavering belief that the galaxy needed to be reborn. There were others who shared that vision, and they would not let her destruction be the end of it. "We'll need to rebuild," Juno said, her voice firm. "Earth can't do it alone. We need to unite the systems, build alliances not just among humans, but with every species that fought for their survival." Arya gave a tight nod. Agreed. The core's energy might have been contained, but there are still factions that want to use it for their own gain. The galaxy's power balance has shifted, and there will be those who try to take advantage of it. Juno stared out at the endless blackness of space. It felt like they were drifting, untethered, in the aftermath of something much larger than any of them. The galaxy had been broken. The Keepers had tried to repair it, but their vision had been twisted, and now it was humanity's responsibility to pick up the pieces. "We'll need to send a message," Juno said after a moment of silence. "A message to the galaxy, to let everyone know that humanity is ready to lead, but that we won't do it alone. We're stronger when we stand together." Eli, who had been quietly checking the systems, turned to face her. "I'll get it transmitted. The galaxy needs to hear our voice." "Make sure the message is clear," Juno said, her gaze unwavering. "Humanity may have saved the galaxy today, but the fight is far from over. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for all of us." The pod began its slow journey toward Earth, the planet a distant beacon of hope and renewal. Juno's mind wandered as she thought of the people they had left behind, of the families that still suffered in the aftermath of the Keepers' crusade. The war had taken its toll, and it was far from over. But they had a chance now, a chance to rebuild. They had the strength, the will, and the unity of those who fought beside them. The core might have been silenced, but the future was still open, filled with the possibility of a galaxy united under a common cause. Juno stood, her legs stiff from hours of sitting, and moved to the viewport, staring at the pale blue orb of Earth. It seemed so small from here, but it was everything. Earth was home, and now it was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a beacon for a new era. "We will rebuild," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else, "and we will stand together." The stars outside shimmered as the pod glided closer to the home they had fought so hard to protect. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, Juno allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, and it had risen. Now the galaxy would learn the truth. Earth would not just survive, Earth would lead.